CNJ's Epic Quest. CNJ's Epic Quest. CNJ's Epic Quest. CNJ's Epic Quest. CNJ's Epic Quest.
Well, hey everybody, this is Derek from D&J's Epic Quest. Just one half of us tonight, but I am joined by author Christopher Brenning. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't looking forward to this today, because all day at work I've been looking forward to doing this. So
Awesome.
Appreciate you taking some time to talk to me here, especially kind of short notice. I know I'd messaged you earlier this week, so I appreciate you making something work here for me.
Absolutely, man. Let's do it.
So, I just finished your second book, The Wrathbringer. I have not read The Servitor of Sin yet, but I was just hoping we could chat about it. Probably be full spoilers, I imagine. This book's a little bit more fresh in my mind than the first book, but there are definitely some things in the first book. So I guess if you didn't mind, if you just wanted to introduce yourself, tell us some whatever info you care to share.
Sure. So I'm Christopher G. Brenning, based out of Racine, Wisconsin. Racine is sandwiched between Milwaukee and Chicago, so nowhere too interesting. I write grimdark fantasy. And when I'm not doing that, I like to hike. I like to travel. In fact, I just got back from Greece, time of my life, and going to Thailand for my 40th birthday in January. So I'm keeping busy.
Oh wow! Yeah, I saw your pictures from Greece. It looked like you had a pretty good time. Some cool pictures.
Yeah, man. But by far the best time of my life, and I'm already plotting in my head how I can get back there. So.
Well, that's cool. I'm glad it was a good time. Not everybody gets to make trips like that, so it's cool that you.
No, definitely once in a lifetime, but hopefully not. Hopefully I can be a regular visitor there.
Yeah, worth going to, huh?
Oh, for sure. It was worth every penny. Absolutely loved it. In fact, it kind of transitioning back to life in the U.S. has been a little bit of a struggle, just because life there is so much slower and the people are different. The food, man, I ate like a king the whole time and lost weight. You know, it was just fantastic. I don't have enough positive things to say about Greece. It was great.
Well, what was your favorite thing there, or what kind of a historical site maybe is the right term? What'd you see? What'd you do?
Well, our Airbnb was right across the street from the Parthenon. So we're sitting, my buddy and I were sitting out on the balcony at night. It's all lit up and having a cocktail and just staring at this place that's thousands of years old. It was surreal, and it was humbling, and it was just fantastic. And then we spent a little time in Corinth, not the modern Corinth, but the ancient Corinth, and got to see the fortress there, which is up on top of a mountain. It's thousands of years old, and just getting to walk up there and hike up on the mountaintop is fantastic.
I imagine it, like you said, surreal just to think of the thousands of years that have passed and all the people that have tread there. And that would be very cool, very humbling just to think about all that.
Yeah, my great grandparents are originally from Greece, so it was it was definitely an experience getting to see how see where they came from and how they lived and all that stuff. So yeah.
Oh, that's even better. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Got to see some of your heritage. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I guess as far as my questions, I kind of jotted these down as I thought of them, so they're not really in any particular order by any means.
Right.
But man, first I will say, I think your books, The Hellborn King, I think that was the first indie book that I ever bought.
Really?
Trying to think back on it. It was before I had the idea of starting a podcast. And I don't even remember how I came across it, but I was just scrolling through Twitter and I saw it. I'm like, oh man, that looks really cool. And so I bought it.
When I first published it, the cover was making its rounds on Twitter quite a bit because it's it's a fantastic cover. Jay Caleb did it, and he knocked it out of the park. And I mean it made the rounds for a while there, so I'm not surprised you ended up seeing it.
Well, I'm glad I did, because it was I haven't read a ton of grimdark, and up until recently, really, I haven't. Since I graduated high school up until probably 2 years ago or so, I hadn't done a whole lot of reading, and then I kind of picked it back up again. But I finished The Wheel of Time, and then, I've read what's out there for A Song of Ice and Fire. That's probably the most grimdark stuff that I've read. Mm. And now Justin and I are going through Malazan. But, man, yeah, just... I couldn't believe how brutal that book was. But I'm like, Jesus Christ. But I loved it. And just some of the twists and turns, it made me want more. I didn't want it to end.
Now, did you read the first edition of it or the second edition?
I guess I don't know. Whatever this one is, if you can tell by the cover, I guess. The best way to tell is on towards the back. It'll tell you the date that it was published. It'll say made in USA, and then it'll give you a date. July 4th, 22.
22. So that is the first edition. Yeah.
Okay.
So really the big difference between those two is that my writing ability for Wrathbringer, I believed was, superior to what it was in the Hellborn King. And I really wanted Hellborn King to be on the same level, for people who want to get into the series and everything. So I went back into it and I cut out like 20,000 useless words, sentences, and just really gave it an extra layer of polish that I thought that the book deserved. So it slimmed it down a little bit, made it, and if you thought it was, a direct, streamlined story before, there's no fat on it in the second edition. It's just, it's just all substance.
Gotcha. Well, I'm no book critic by any means, but I guess from what I remember of it, I didn't feel like there was anything that I wouldn't have wanted to read. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I going through that book, Cedric's, I can't remember his son's name right now. So forgive me on that. I wasn't expecting him to get butchered. Mm-hmm. And then, I'm going through and I'm kind of thinking, okay, Cedric, he's going to get his revenge. And then I got turned on my head there. Mm-hmm. and then Madeline, that ending, it made me think of Game of Thrones, where Dany's brother said, "Oh, if I'd let the whole Khalasar fuck you if it got me what I wanted," or whatever he said. I'm like, okay, well, you just did that. Man, that was a rough go. I guess, one of my first questions here, and if I mispronounce words, please correct me.
It's fantasy, but you're going to at some point.
Right. But hopefully I don't butcher anything too bad. And hopefully I'll ask you questions you don't get asked all the time. But Kaldakis, the continent of your world, mm-hmm. Is that the only continent we're going to see? Have you thought about beyond those borders or anything like that?
I have. Are you going to see it in the Hellborn King saga? Maybe not, but I do plan on having a sequel series, 2, maybe 3 books or whatever, and that will include an expanded world, so you'll get to see more of it. But I think for the duration of the saga, it's going to be confined to the continent.
Cool. Yeah, I wasn't sure, what's there, what's not there. And I think at one point I asked you on Twitter, but I don't remember, how many books were you planning for this?
5 full-length books. Obviously, I have the prequel novella, and I might maybe just kind of see how things are going. Might throw another novella in there. My whole idea for Servitor of Sin was, to give the ebook away for free if you sign up for my mailing list, and just try to get people, and just give them a freebie to try to get them interested in the series. But I definitely would not recommend reading the Servitor of Sin before you've at least read the Hellborn King, but preferably I'd like you to read them in order, just because there's so much context that you're just not going to have if you jump into the prequel right away.
Sure. Yeah, and I just finished Wrathbringer earlier this week, so I haven't jumped into it yet. But I mean, I think it's like 60-ish pages, so it's pretty manageable. I mean, you could probably take that down in a sitting. So
absolutely, yeah.
What is your writing process like? Do you just you get home from work, if you're at work thinking about, or I guess I'm assuming, I don't know if you write full time or, you got a day job, but, if you're thinking about things, you just immediately start writing, or do you dedicate time every day or a couple days, something like that to it?
Right now, my writing process is just a series of struggles. It's just, struggling to find motivation, struggling to find ideas. But typically on a good day, I'd go to work, my day job, and then go to the gym for, an hour or so, and then come home. I like to do my writing in the evening. For whatever reason, I don't like writing when it's light out. My creativity just kind of comes out when it's dark. So sometimes I'll mix up a cocktail. I'm always burning incense, playing music. I have lighting all around my desk. I really try to set the mood for when I write. And some nights, I really struggle with a certain chapter or a character, so I'll skip around. I have a big cast of characters, and sometimes I'll get in a groove where it's just I really only feel like writing one specific character. And for the last couple of weeks, it was mostly Lucetta. She was the one I was writing. But now I've shifted over. I'm writing a chapter with Sylvia and Damien. And so, whenever I switch characters, I always change up the color of my lighting. I change up the kind of incense I'm burning, just really trying to set the mood and get myself immersed in what I'm doing. And every character has their own soundtrack too. Lucetta's almost always black metal, and my barbarian characters, it's always like neo folk, like High Lung Wardruna, stuff like that. So just really trying to just set the mood and kind of immerse myself into it.
That was kind of one of my other questions, just wondering how you get into your characters' heads to write them, and that's a pretty good answer, I think.
Yeah,
yep, that's awesome. And just your answer there kind of leads me to one of my other thoughts. These first 2 books, when I read them, I felt very things are very black, white, and gray, that there wasn't a ton of color. And I don't mean that as a knock on your writing at all. Just the way I felt about it, the mood that it put me in. But then we get this chapter with Einar, and he took some mushrooms, I think, and had this trip, and just an explosion of color. And I just loved it. I thought that was so cool. Just this big transition. I really like that a lot. I guess that's not so much a question, but just kind of an observation.
Is it a bleak, unhappy world? Yes, but I do try to perforate it every once in a while with stuff like that. Moments of levity, and then right after, usually I like to break your heart too. So I don't like to keep it too late for too long. So end of Wrathbringer. Since we're talking spoilers, when Gareth and Madeline have their wedding, I was told by quite a few friends and readers and everything that that it was a beautiful scene. You know, they're finally coming together, but then I go and break your heart right afterwards. So, you know, can't make it too happy. It is grimdark after all.
It is, and like I said, I haven't read a ton of that, but it's that it seems more realistic than, you know, just fantasy, because there's fantastic elements to your books, but it's, for the most part, I mean, it seems pretty realistic. I mean, it's absolutely dark and brutal, but I mean, it's something I could see playing out.
Yeah, and I did that intentionally because I want people to be able to immerse themselves in the world and be able to identify with certain characters and their struggles and everything. And so I put a lot of time and effort into making it as realistic as possible, you know, researching. I mean, I've always been kind of a history nerd, military nerd, and, you know, just really researching the weapons and tactics, you know, just, you know, what the world would look like if it actually existed. And yeah, there are some fantasy elements in there, but my like magic system, I would say, is more supernatural than it is like a hard, like Brandon Sanderson type magic system where there's rules and there's, you know, counters to everything. It's just like my fantasy elements are more the unknown, the unexplained, the paranormal, stuff like that.
And I like that a lot. And so I guess with that, Lucetta and this woman in black that she has, that's the woman in black is probably my favorite character, because it's that unknown. And so I haven't decided if she's something that's real or just something inside her head. And I'm trying to find all these clues and stuff. And I don't really know that I found anything.
Yeah.
But
that's a hotly debated topic among my readers, is who is the woman in black? What is she? Is she real? Is she just in Lucetta's head? Like what is? And you're going to find out more and more, and, you know, as that character arc progresses. But writing Lucetta and the Woman in Black, it's one of my favorite things to do, just because it's so dark, and it's just there's no limits to what can happen, you know, between those two characters. And originally I was going to cut Lucetta because, you know, when I first started writing the Hellborn King, because I was like, well, I don't really have any other characters for her to interact with, because she's kind of a loner. She doesn't feel, you know, a deep connection to anybody really. And I'm just like, well, I can't just have her off by herself. How would I even write that? Like, how would that be entertaining? And then I came up with the idea for the Woman in Black and started piecing together the whole story arc in my head. And it's, you know, whenever I seem to find myself in a writing slump, you know, I'll just throw on some heavy dark music and just, you know, just dabble in a Lucetta chapter, and it usually gets me going again creatively.
I'm really glad you didn't cut her, because yeah, I mean, she's I would say she's probably definitely my favorite. It's so interesting, and just that battle I have with myself to think, well, you know, is she real? And then, you know, we kind of see her wasting away, and I think kind of on the verge of, you know, I guess being an alcoholic in some sense, or maybe that's kind of what it is. But I wonder a little bit, because towards the end of Wrathbringer, we see Madeline kind of transform, and it seemed like she kind of was seeing something similar as Lucetta. And so I wonder if there's a connection there or not.
Well, I can either confirm nor deny anything as far as that goes, but
Sure. Maybe that's kind of an answer, but man, you know, and this entity convincing her to kill her mom, and I did not see that coming at all. I don't know. The idea was great, and I love it, and I can't wait to read more about it.
Yeah, that was a particularly difficult chapter to write, because in book one, you know, the Hellborn King, the Queen was, you know, the character of the Queen was more or less a tribute to my mother and the struggles that, you know, real life struggles that she went through with my father. And so she wasn't too happy when she read that her character got killed in the round. But I was like, hey, it's it is what it is. It's it's a story, and I just felt that it kind of had to be that way, and I kind of needed the story to go in that direction, and that whole thread there with her grappling with the madness that's consuming her. You're basically watching a controlled demolition in slow motion with Lucetta. You're watching somebody just slowly coming unglued and coming off the rails, and so you're gonna see that story and the fallout of what happened with the Queen continue into the next main installment in the series.
It is a very interesting. That's a very interesting way to put it. And when you put it that way, I can see that. And I'm thinking back to her story where, she's thinking she's going to build this kingdom on, up from the ashes, basically. And I think it's probably not going to be what she is expecting it to be, is kind of how I feel about it. I don't know. It's very intriguing, very interesting. And if I had to give somebody one reason to read these books, it would probably be Lucetta so far. Not that I haven't enjoyed the other characters, but she's been the most interesting to me.
Yeah, everybody has their own favorite. It's really interesting talking to different reviewers and friends, family, fans. Everybody has a different opinion on the characters, and everybody has their own favorite character. Like some people, their favorite character is Titan, or other people, their favorite character is Madeline. I've even had people say Gareth is their favorite character, and they can't stand this other character that somebody else really loves. And so that, to me, to have characters that are that realistic and have that depth to them, where it's not universally agreed upon, like, oh, this character is good and this character sucks. Like, everybody has different opinions on the cast, and that's something I was really aiming for with the series. I really wanted to make it so that each character is unique, and depending on your own personal life experience, you may identify with this character in ways that somebody else might not, and that was very much intentional on my part.
I think, one of the things when I first started reading Hellborn King is trying to decide, well, okay, is Damien, is he really a bad guy? And these people that I'm being told are the good guys, are they really the good guys? Is it just a matter of perspective? Or like you said, life experience, all that stuff will play a role into it. Let's see. Were there any other books or any other types of media that influenced you, that you drew inspiration from for your series?
Well, believe it or not, I'm actually not a book reader. For whatever reason, I just don't enjoy reading. It's really hard for me to just sit with a book and focus on it. I did the audiobook thing for a while when I was at my previous job. But mostly, I'm a movie and TV series kind of guy. And so, I think it's kind of easy to see some influence from like Game of Thrones, for example. In fact, I've said it on multiple podcasts, where the thing that really inspired me to pull the trigger on writing my own book series was how colossally terrible this season 8 was of Game of Thrones. And it absolutely let me down, broke my heart. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, you know what? I've always had this crazy idea in my head of writing my own book series. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I can give it a shot. Maybe I can do it. Maybe I can stick the landing. And so, it went from just a crazy idea in my head. And then about a year later, I had a physical copy in my hand. And now, it's been 2 years, and I've sold copies in 15 countries. It's absolutely wild to see how far it's come in a relatively short amount of time.
Wow. Yeah, that was so. I guess that leads into another question I had. So obviously, that was a pretty fast, I guess, transition for you. But So the TV show is kind of an influence. I was, I guess, like when the idea first formed in your head, it was because of that TV show then, or maybe not necessarily. That was just to write something.
Yeah, that was the final motivation to go ahead and pull the trigger and start writing. But I've actually had a bunch of these characters for a long time. In fact, I came up with Damien Dreadfire back in like 2004, 2005, and as well as some of the other characters from my online RPG, browser-based RPG games. We used to do freeform role play. It's all text-based, and you'd come up with your own country and your own society and everything, and then you'd interact with other players, sometimes friendly, sometimes not. And some of these characters, like Damien, for example, I'm intimately familiar with because he's been a part of my life for so long, and so I wanted to make him the central focus of the book, and then bring in a couple other characters. Some of their names have changed, but the idea of the character is still there. So I've always had a knack for writing. It's always something I've enjoyed doing, and then I got that final push to, like, all right, go ahead, let's give this a try and see what happens when Game of Thrones ended.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm always curious what creates that spark for an author to start putting words to paper. I like hearing that backstory, that history to it.
It's definitely got to be in you. It's got to be something that you already have in you. It's because it's easy to start a book. It's really difficult to finish one. So if it's not just in your blood to create, to do something like this, it's going to be really difficult for you to do it. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure everybody has their own unique story about, hey, what inspired you to actually to do this? And you can talk to any indie author or any traditionally published author, and I'm sure you're going to get a different story every single time.
Yeah, definitely. So did you know you were going to go the indie route, or did you look in? I guess I don't know how that process works, but did you look into the traditional book publishing?
Yeah, I actually did. But when I first started brainstorming ideas for the Hellborn King, my intention was to self-publish it. But then when it came closer to the end, when I was about to finish, I was like, you know what? Why don't I just give this a try and see if I can get a traditional book deal? So I sent out 50 query letters, and I set a hard limit for myself. I was like, I'm not going to do this forever. 50 is going to be my limit. And so I sent out 50 queries, got 50 rejections, and I only got one piece of critique, I guess you could say, because most of these are just copy paste form rejections, like, dear author, thank you for your submission. Only one gave me any sort of personalized feedback. It was still a form rejection, but she said, I feel like you're starting your book in the wrong place. And I had a different prologue at the time. The prologue actually started in the aftermath of the ambush. And so I'm sitting there thinking about it, and I decided to back it up to where it starts now. And I rewrote 80% of that prologue in 2 days. But oh
wow,
yeah, and it is what it is now in the Hellborn King. But yeah, after all the rejections and after I did that, I was like, you know what? Maybe my destiny is in the indies. And so found a cover artist, found a great formatter on Upwork, and just hit the grind, man. Started that Twitter account, 0 followers, and just started grinding and just, really trying to put myself out there, even though my marketing is still nowhere near what it should be. But it's just been the slow grind, one book at a time, one reader at a time.
Well, I can say you've won me over, and so Justin and I mean, we've got 2 books that we're reading together, and then, we're each reading something else when we're not doing those. And, I finally got around to reading yours, and I've talked to him about it. And that's kind of why he's not here now, is because he doesn't want to be spoiled with things. I think at some point he'll get around to reading them, but it is the indie community does seem to be pretty awesome and uplifting. I mean, I guess obviously we're not authors, but just being some sort of creative we have to embrace that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of fun, getting the chance to do this, talk to you, working with other people. It's a lot of fun, and I imagine it's very rewarding on your end to do what you do.
Absolutely. And the indie community is not without its own share of problems, but by and large, I mean, from the authors to the reviewers and everything, especially on Twitter or X as it's called now, which I think is a terrible name, but
I agree.
Yeah, I mean everybody there is just great, so generous. Even if let's say an indie reviewer has a book and they don't necessarily like it, they're still gracious. They're not gonna disrespect you or anything like that. I mean, the indie community there is just so great, and it's really. I mean, without it, I wouldn't have a platform. I mean, I wouldn't have sold any books outside of my my personal Facebook page friends and people around here where I live, so that Twitter's really allowed me to reach out and develop a global audience, and it's fantastic, man. I have no desire to go the traditional route with anything. I mean, if somebody in the industry wants to make me an offer, I'd entertain it, but it's not something I'm going to actively seek out.
I guess I don't know that content is the right word, but you're happy with the way things are then.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. So you said 15 countries. Have you had to translate your book into any other languages, or it's just English?
It's just
these
English.
people are reading it in English in other countries.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see here. Who is your favorite character? I don't remember if I asked this already or if you mentioned it in some capacity.
I would say my favorite character I would say is Damien, but the character that I find is the most fun to write would probably be Lucetta. Although sometimes it changes. Sometimes I get in a Titan mood where I'm just pissed off at everything and just I feel like I feel like writing a Titan chapter. So I mean, it's all situational, but by and large, if you held a gun to my head and said pick your favorite character, I'd say Damien.
Okay, yeah, he's a big dude.
Mm-hmm. And originally he was supposed to be a point of view character, but I started, I don't know, I got maybe a paragraph or two into a chapter of his first chapter. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to go down this route because I don't want you to know what he's thinking. I don't want you to know his motivations. I don't want you to know his backstory. I want him to remain an enigma. And I want you to only see him through the eyes of other characters. And I don't know very many other book series. I know they're out there, but I don't know very many that have their main character not a point of view character. So I thought that was something, not it's not 100% unique, but it's still pretty unique. So I thought I would go that route with it. More of his story is great. It's like a slow drip with him. More of his story and everything is coming out. Servitor of Sin, you're going to get to see a lot more. The next installment, book 3 in the series, you're going to see a bit more, and you're just going to get to know the character better. And that was another motivation for me to write the Servitor of Sin, is because I started to get the impression from readers that at the end of Wrathbringer, they were starting to feel like Damien was more of a villain, and he was kind of slipping from that gray zone into more of a villain. So that was another motivation for me to write Servitor of Sin, so you can see more of why he does what he does and kind of hopefully pull him back more into a gray character area.
Yeah, I guess I don't know that I didn't feel like he was becoming more of a villain, but I definitely noticed that he wasn't so much like a central focus. He had these other characters around him, like you're saying, that are, you're getting their point of view and how they interact with him. But I did like that, and I guess I can't think of any book series off the top of my head either. Where the guy that's kind of the main character, you're not in his head. So yeah, it is definitely a little bit more unique, I think. One of my thoughts in The Wrathbringer, I felt like just about every character at some point could fit the title of Wrathbringer. Tyler Titan definitely had his moments where, like he goes on his kind of rampage towards the end of the big battle. Like, okay, well, he's letting out his wrath. And same thing with Madeline. She had her moments. Gareth, when he's on the front lines, like, okay, well, for a little bit, I was kind of debating. I'm like, okay, I wonder, is it Titan or is it Gareth that's on the cover? And then, I got that reveal, but I wasn't sure for a little while as to who it was. But was that something you intentionally did to give all these characters? I don't know, maybe not necessarily a moment to shine, but where that the title kind of fit with them.
Yeah. And it's interesting you bring that point up, like you weren't sure who the Wrathbringer was, because I've had one, maybe two people say, like with the Hellborn King, they're like, well, who's the Hellborn King? Is it Damien? Is it Marcellus Bethard? Like, and I'm like, that wasn't an intention of mine, but I could see why you would think that. Yeah. But I definitely want to give each character their time to shine, and there's going to be a different main character gracing the cover of each book. So yeah, I mean, I knew I wanted Titan to be on the cover of Wrathbringer, and I knew I wanted it to be, named kind of in his honor, because you see him at the end of Hellborn King, he's in a very low place, because he thought he lost Madeline, and he blames himself, and he deserts, and he's just like, I'm just going to go off into some pit somewhere and drink myself to death. And then he gets captured at the beginning of Wrathbringer, and then he's like this close to being executed, and he goes from that to rising up to being Gareth's personal bodyguard, and it's this whole transformation. And then the big battle at the end, he finally gets to let out just all that rage, all that wrath that's just been building in him the entire time. And so, yeah. And then I can't say who's going to be on the cover of the next one. I can't say what the title is, but that's going to be coming within the next couple of weeks. I'm going to be on with Andrew Maddox of Andrew's Wizardly Reads, and we're going to do a live cover reveal. So that's going to be pretty awesome. In fact, I'm debating whether it's the best cover in the series. I think it's. I mean, the Hellborn King for me, it's always going to have a special place because it's the first one, and I think it's so iconic. But this cover, man, it's badass. I can't wait to drop it.
I did see that on Twitter, and I'm looking forward to that. And so I've been thinking in my head, and I feel like in my head I'm thinking Gareth, but I guess obviously I'll just have to wait and see. But
just have to wait and see. It won't be long.
Well, I'm glad it won't be too long. I feel like he's probably going to play a pretty big role in the next book. I don't know how much you can speak to that. Or it's not really so much question.
I really can't.
Just with the role, I mean, he's definitely seemed like a character who's stepped up a lot. I think maybe I feel like he's probably had the most growth as a character.
Yep, I agree. It's a coming of age story, really. It's the hero's journey. It's not a wholly unique storyline, but he's lost in the first book. He's a man child. He is consumed by his vices, and then you see him stepping into the role of the man that he always needed to be. He's finally embracing that, and hey, even though I have people around me that care about me, nobody's going to save me but myself. And he's accepting that, and you're seeing him grow up essentially, even though he's in his late 20s.
Yeah, it felt good to just see that, he's kind of shaking his vices is a great word for it, but taking over. And then, but I could, not that I've been on any front lines of a battlefield, but he gets this training. He's got his best friend training him, helping him, but then he's still scared when he gets out there, and who wouldn't be? I mean, I think about, like, in our own history, battles like that, like what a absolute nightmare that must have been to,
Well, you
be the
can't
guy
be
on the
brave.
front line with a shield.
Well, you can't be brave unless you're afraid, right? Because bravery is overcoming your fear. So you have to have fear, and I don't care how tough you are. Everyone that goes into battle, there's always fear. It's always there in the back of your mind. And I wanted it to be faithful to that. I didn't want it to be where, Gareth has this elite military training. He's been doing it for 6 months, 8 months, or whatever, and all of a sudden, there's no fear, and he just, there's nobody that can stop him. I didn't want to do that. So like when he's sitting there on his horse and he's surveying the battlefield, there's a lot of doubt all of a sudden that it's creeping into his mind, and he's afraid, and he feels like turning and fleeing, but he can't, because he's embracing that idea that this is bigger than me, that like my men are looking to me to be the standard bearer, because my father, the king, is has degenerated and fallen so far that he can't be the one out here leading the army. It has to be me. And what's going to inspire my men? Well, it's me sucking it up and being brave. And you see him do that. But even though he's growing and he's maturing and he's kind of shaking off these vices, the struggle is still there. He still struggles. He still struggles with in fact, at the end of Wrathbringer, when Madeline leaves, it almost breaks him. But he uses that newfound strength to help keep him going, because again, he realizes this is bigger than me and my desires and everything. And so, yeah, I mean, that's something you're going to see consistently throughout my series with my characters, is that no matter what trajectory they're on, there's always going to be that realistic, humanity to them. I mean, there isn't going to be any character where it becomes a Mary Sue, or they're not still struggling. They're not still dealing with conflicts with other people around, or whatever. There's always going to be that layer of realism to it with the characters. And for me, that's really what makes this a character-driven military fantasy, I guess you could say. I've had people call it all sorts of different things, but one thing everybody seems to agree on is that it's definitely character-based for the most part.
Yeah, I like that believability to the characters. I mean, I'm sure we've all read that book series, where who the hero is, mm-hmm. They're going to live. How are they going to pull it off? And I don't feel like any of your characters, I don't know for certain if they're going to pull it off. Are they going to survive? Some, I hope, more so than others, they do.
Yeah, there is no
escape. A lot of them aren't going to get happy endings. Yeah,
there is no escaping consequences in my world. I mean, if you make a mistake, you pay for it. And like Cedric Valens, his mistake was hubris and not thinking clearly through his anger, and it cost him. Madeline, I mean, she knew she was walking into a hopeless situation, but her pride got in the way, and she paid for it. Lucetta, her ambitions are beginning to consume her, and it's costing her people in her life that she cares deeply about. So there's consequences to everything that happens, and nobody's ever going to be able to escape poor choices. And that's yet another layer of realism that I intentionally am putting into the series.
I love it. I think anybody who's read this, I would have to agree with that. I mean, I don't know how you could not enjoy that realism to things. It's just, to me, it makes it so much more enjoyable than something so fantastic that it's just not believable. I mean, those things are fun to read too. But yeah, I like that grit. I like that that layer of realism.
Yeah, if you're backed into a corner and it's just you and there's 50 guys around you, chances are you're not making it out of there. I mean, and to me, it would just feel like a cop out if, all of a sudden somebody found themselves in a hopeless situation, but just at the last moment they get saved. Like, nah, That's not for me. That's just not how I operate. I mean, if somebody's in a hopeless situation, it's probably hopeless. They're probably going to die, or they're going to suffer some sort of horrific consequences. That's just what you're going to get with the Hellborn King saga.
Yeah, and I feel like you kind of tease us a little bit because at Castle Morden, and Ruin gets built. Einar builds Ruin, and the Xylomatians,
Zilmatians, yep.
Zilmatians, all they just throw themselves at the wall, and the defenders, they kill a bunch of them, and they're feeling pretty good about things.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't last long.
Nope.
All right. Something you may have answered already, but what's been the hardest part for you to write in these books so far?
Oh boy. That's a good question. I don't know if anybody's really asked me that before. I wouldn't say it's necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily say there's a hardest part. For me, the hardest part is just trying to stay consistent with my writing. That's the biggest struggle, because I always had this goal. I try to do at least 1,000 words a night, and I've especially this year has been a really difficult year for me. I just have not been hitting my goals, and so coming up with the story, the plot, and everything. I mean that stuff's easy. Coming up with the dialogue, but it's staying motivated and it's keeping that drive going. That's the most difficult, because like I'll be sitting there sometimes. It's like, yeah, I'm a screw around on YouTube. Yeah, I'm a screw around on Twitter. Now all of a sudden, it's like 9:30, 10 o'clock, and I got to be up for work at 4:45. And it's like, well, I didn't get anything done tonight. So I would say that by far that's the most difficult part. Actually, like when I get into the zone, when I get into the groove and I'm going, it's off to the races and it's easy. But it's just finding that ability to shut out the outside world and just focus on what I'm doing. That's by far the most difficult thing for me.
There's a lot of distractions out there for sure, and
yes,
I'm sure we can all relate to that. Have you had anybody, whether it's editor or like a alpha beta reader, something like that? Has anybody been like, whoa, like that was too much? Like the only example I could think would be like Madeline's ending in the first book. Have you gotten any like pushback on anything like that?
No, actually, I have had some people say, oh, it's a little bloodier than what I would typically read or whatever. But the scene with Madeline, which I thought was going to be, well, I mean, it's probably the most controversial scene in the series, so far. And I wanted to be very careful about that, because I originally didn't want to do that with Madeline, but it just kept going in this direction where I didn't really want it to go, because it's like, I care about this character. I don't want to see her suffer, but it's going in this really dark direction. How do I do it, but do it in such a way where it's not tasteless, and it's not going to utterly offend the reader to the point where they don't even want to continue the series? So I kept a lot of it off the page. A lot of what happens to her is just implied,
Right.
There really isn't anything that's really all that graphic when it comes to that scene. But you using your natural deductive problem solving abilities, you know what happened to her. But no, I really haven't had anybody say, oh, you went way too far with this, or you should have dialed it back there. All the feedback I've had so far is has been really great. And I also want to be careful not to fall into a trap being grimdark, where it's either torture porn or it's just gratuitous violence for the sake of violence. So, just blood and guts everywhere. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, the violence that I use, it comes in short, controlled bursts. It's not like it's not like throughout the whole book, it's all soaked in blood. It's not. But when there is violence, it comes in fast and heavy, but then I pull the punch. I like that. It's not like you're reading page after page of, like guys getting tortured and stuff like that. It's to me it's overkill and too much of a, well, I hesitate to say that torture and all that's a good thing, but too much of a good thing is bad, right? And like a battle that goes on too long is bad. Name a scene like a romantic scene or a scene between two characters, like anything that goes on too long, it just it's too much. It's just too much. I mean, and that's why, and that was another reason why I went back and did a second edition of Hellborn King. It's like some of my descriptions of scenes and things that are going on. Yeah, it's kind of dragging a little too long. It's not necessary, and so I went in and chopped it out. But coming back to your question, no, I really haven't had anybody say, hey, you crossed the line with this. So I'm pretty fortunate there, and I think I nailed what I was going for, where I kind of walk this fine line between too much and not enough.
I would agree. I mean, these things, Madeline, Lucetta, like all these different things, the ambush, Cedric. I'd read these and I'd pause and be like, whew, like, damn, like that was that. But I wasn't like, all right, that's enough. I got to put this book down. It was not tasteless.
I hit you hard, but then I give you a chance to breathe. It's not, you're not just constantly getting assaulted.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. I think that's all the questions I had related to the book. Books. Just maybe a couple fun questions. Justin and I, we're both pretty big metalheads. Enjoy that type of music.
Nice.
Favorite band? Who's your favorite band?
Oh boy.
Or favorites, I guess.
Favorites. Camelot, obviously big favorite of mine. I used to be a big death metal guy back in the day, but my musical tastes have changed. I dabble in a little bit of black metal. Shamash, underground band from Switzerland. I love them. Very atmospheric. Achilles, another great black metal band. I also enjoy neofolk quite a bit. Heilung, Vordruna, Gildir, just so many bands. Like the rabbit hole is endless with that. And basically neofolk it's like Nordic traditional music, but with a modern swing to it. I also listen to a lot of post rock, which is mostly just instrumental, not a lot of vocals, and that's helpful too. I prefer to listen to music that's either no vocals or it's in a different language. Because when I'm sitting here trying to write and come up with stuff, I don't want words rattling around in my ears. So I do that. But I mean, my musical tastes nowadays are all over the place. Sleep Token's a band that blew up this year and kind of sucked me in just because it's so different. It's something I normally would never listen to, but it's just for whatever reason it just grabbed me. Maybe the lyrical content or whatever, but that's a band that I've really been enjoying lately. And so I mean, in my younger years, it was just let's just listen to the heaviest, fastest stuff I could find. I mean, just you name the death metal band, and I was all about it. But now my tastes have mellowed a little bit, and I can appreciate good music regardless of what genre it is.
Very cool. Last concert that you went to?
Last concert was Camelot, actually. A couple of months ago in Chicago, they came through, and that was my third time seeing them. They always put on a great show. I would never not recommend seeing them.
I don't know if they've ever come through. Well, I guess I can't say I've heard of them. Maybe I've heard of the name, but I'm not familiar. If you played them for me, I don't know that I'd recognize it, but I'll check them out.
When we get done, go to YouTube, type Camelot, Rule the World. That's a good song to kind of jump in. But it's with their old singer, but it's still it's one of their best songs, and it's you'll know from the get-go if it's something that you can get into or not.
All right. Yeah, I'll do that. Next concert you would go to?
Oh boy. Well, see, living in the Milwaukee area, so many tours skip the area. They just don't come around. So I'd have to go to Chicago or Minneapolis if I want to see a big tour, unfortunately. So I don't know. It all depends on what comes through. Next year in August, I'm going to Norway to Midgardsblot, which is like a 4-day outdoor camp out music festival where it's a bunch of neo folk and black metal bands. So that's definitely on my calendar. But as far as anything that comes around here, it's just, pretty much whatever I can get, you know?
Sure. Well, I don't know that I've got any other questions for you. I guess is there anything you can tell us as far as what to expect for the third book here?
Oh boy. Well, third book, what can you expect? Well, the trajectory the series is on, Hellborn King, obviously a book one in any series, it's going to be heavy on the world building and the lore to establish the characters in the world that you're reading. So, book one of a series is kind of what it is, but the Wrathbringer, I feel personally that I avoided the typical sophomore slump that a lot of authors experience. And, as far as the world building and the action and the momentum, Wrathbringer, I think was a definite upgrade over Hellborn King. And the new book that I'm working on now is going to be an upgrade to that. In fact, the prologue for the new book, I think, is the best thing I've written yet. I mean, the prologue is it's so awesome. It's action packed. I mean, it's fantastic. You're going to love it. In fact, I'm probably going to, I'm considering reaching out to my narrator who did the audiobook for Hellborn King and just have him narrate that and put it out because I want people to see it so bad. So, yeah, book 3, expect more battles, probably a bit faster pace too, because one thing I did with Wrathbringer is I kept the chapters a little shorter. Like Hellborn King, there's like a 10,000 word chapter, 7,000, 8,000 word chapter, whereas Wrathbringer, they're more like in the 4,000 to 6,000 range, so it kind of makes you feel like the pace is a bit quicker because you're getting through the chapters faster. So, you can expect a bit more of that. You can expect the world to broaden a bit. You're gonna see other cultures and stuff that you haven't really gotten to see before. You're gonna get a point of view character from the Droathians, who to this point are only bothersome merchants that pop up, in all the big cities. And you're also at the end of Wrathbringer, you get to see the Obneri, who are these. I'm hesitant to say Viking-esque, but they're basically a warlike tribe, and they're seafaring people, and they're going to be involved in the next book too. So the world is going to expand, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting it done. It's just I have no idea when it's going to be done. Hopefully I can put it out towards the end of next year. I'm really, really hoping. So, because I don't want to keep people waiting too long. I don't want to go years and years between releases. I want to keep it on a pretty consistent schedule.
Well, good things take time. Yeah, there's
True.
no sense in rushing it.
Yeah, but I also feel an obligation to the fans, to people who invested their time and their money into the series. I don't want you to have to wait 5 to 10 years for the next book. I just don't. I don't want to do that to you.
Yeah, Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire. I guess I don't know that we'll ever see the next book to that or not.
Yep, Patrick Rothfuss, he's another example. I mean, not to badmouth the guy, but still, it's been what, over a decade. People are waiting. And to me, just me personally, if people are going to invest their time into something I created, I feel that I owe it to you. I owe it to you to keep going and to keep giving you the content that you want to have. And I've always felt that way as an artist, as someone who's always been creative. And, so yeah, I'm going to keep going. No matter what the cost, I'm going to keep going. And my goal is to get all these books done before, or maybe around by the time I'm 45, and I turn 40 in January. So I've got a pretty tight schedule to get three more full-length books done.
I imagine. You must since you came up with this idea, I imagine you know where it's going to end. It's just a matter of getting there.
I know the last sentence of the last chapter of the last book. It's already up here. I know exactly how I want it to end. So,
gotcha. That's always exciting to hear. Rothfuss, I tried reading, and I really struggle with the first person point of view reading from that. It for whatever reason, it just takes me out of the story, and I don't particularly care for it a whole lot. So,
I prefer the third person.
Yeah, I do too. I tried reading that. I was probably more than 10 years ago. I don't even know if the second book was out when I tried reading it. And I've aged. I'm probably a little bit more mature now than when I was younger. So maybe I could get through it. It's just a matter of trying to look past my, I guess, own personal bias on the point of view. But
no, everybody has their own preference and everything. And, I prefer third person past tense. That's just how I've always written. And that's just how I prefer to do things. And a lot of people enjoy it. Some people enjoy the first person. It all depends on your personal taste.
I think that's fair. Yeah, it's just easier for me to. I think it sounds weird because like you get that first person point of view, but it doesn't feel like whenever I'm reading something, whether it's a male, female character, whatever. Like I try to put myself in their head, and I just don't feel like I can do that in a first person point of view.
Yeah. And another thing with my writing style is that I put you in the head of the characters too, because anytime a character is thinking something, I put it in italics. So like, when they're speaking, it's in the quotation marks, but then there may be a little exposition and then you're getting the thoughts and they're having, and so that's also something I wanted to do too, to add another layer of complexity. Like you're literally in the character's head. You're reading their thoughts. You know what they're thinking, and as well as what they're doing, you know what's going on in their head, and what they're thinking may not necessarily match up with what they're doing. They may appear to be calm and confident, but on the inside they're freaking out. So
that's something I've always enjoyed. Just because it's like, okay, like I said, I want to put myself in that head, and you get their thoughts, and like, okay, well, maybe that is what I would think, or that's not how I would think, if it were actually me. So I do enjoy that. Well, is there, I guess, anything else you'd like to say to wrap things up here? Where can people find you? Where can they get your books? Anything along those lines?
You can find the books on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. If you sign up for my email list at christophergbrenning.com, you can get a free ebook download of The Servitor of Sin. But again, don't read it until you've read at least the Hellborn King, although I prefer you to read them all in order. You can find me on social media. I'm biggest on Twitter, aka X. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, but I don't do a whole lot there. I probably should, but Twitter is really the best place to find me. I'
Awesome. Well, again, I'm looking forward to book 3 when it comes out. I'm excited to see this cover. I've really enjoyed your books and look forward to continuing to enjoy them.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for having me on.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you again for taking the time here to be with me, and thanks again for your time.
Absolutely.
Have a great night.
You too.
DMJ's Epic Quest. DMJ's Epic Quest. DMJ's Epic Quest. CNJ's Epic Quest. CNJ's Epic Quest. CNJ's Epic Quest.